Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to talk about something that I hear quite often, and that is, but I don't have trauma. So if you're interested, keep listening. So I've joined many different groups of trauma survivors over the years, and one thing that I notice in common with most of us is at some point we have said, but my trauma's not that bad, or I don't feel like I really had trauma though, or I'm fine, like I don't know what all the fuss is about. And I feel like this is the ultimate misguide from what is actually going on. And what I mean by that is that I heard something at a training event once, and it really stuck with me, and it was this: that trauma is not in an event, it's in the adaptations that we make to survive and cope with the effects of that event on our lives. So I wanted to delve into that a bit, because I feel like we disqualify ourselves from saying that we have trauma because we don't think it's that bad. And different people cope with things in different ways, and it's to do with their capacity to cope or not cope, and a lot of that is built from how we develop as a child and our attachments. And one of the things that I think we see in more complex PTSD and dissociative disorders is the trauma that comes out of not having secure attachments, and how that changes the way we are able or not able to form relationships. And relationships really are the basis of our ability to cope with things moving forward. But as trauma survivors, we often want to isolate because we don't trust other people, because other people have been a source of pain in our lives. And this is like a circle that goes round and round and round and round, and it usually starts with us denying the fact that we had trauma anyway, and relying on habits that we have created to cope with the trauma that have not been based on getting relational support or getting around others to learn how to self-soothe ourselves. And instead we've avoided it either with addiction or other ways of numbing our pain, like self-harm or suicidal thinking, because those things give us a way out. It gives us a ability to numb for a while, so that we can take the edge off of the distress. Sometimes it can be eating problems. I know that that's one that I'm struggling with right now, because when I'm too exhausted to deal with daily life stuff, because I'm having flashbacks, the last thing I want to do is tell myself that I need to take care of myself and get my butt into the kitchen and make myself some healthy food that's going to nourish my body. I'd rather just pretend that I don't need to eat and wait till I fall over, which is not healthy. And as well as those kind of adaptations, there's dissociation itself, which is the ultimate, I'm switching off the brain now to preserve my energy to keep the physical functions in the body going, and you basically do the bare minimum to stay alive in your dissociated states. So I just kind of wanted to explain that concept, because if you are somebody who has symptoms that I've described, like you're having problems with addiction or eating, or you're dissociating, or you have self-harm or suicidal ideations, then and people have told you that you have trauma in your life, but you're like, but it's not that bad. It's not about the trauma, it's about the adaptations that you made. So you qualify, if you even want to use the qualification word, and I don't like that, but if you're going to go down that route in your head, you qualify as having that disorder because you've met the criteria in the diagnostic manual or the ISSD thing, the European version of the DSM, and somebody has verified that, and you've sat with them, someone who's qualified has said to you, you know, here is your diagnosis. And I would really encourage you to do two things with your diagnosis. The first one being to accept it, because when you understand what's going on, it gives you a framework to understand how to get better. And the second thing I would say to you is to not over-identify with your disorder. So accept it, but know that that is not everything that you are, because that is overwhelming too. I mean, I know that I have DID, but I also know that DID and my trauma history is not all that I am. I'm much more than that. I'm a survivor, I'm an artist, I'm a creative, I'm a writer. You know, there's lots of things about my personality that is not based on influence from other personalities in my system, or the fact that I have them because I had to cope with stuff that most people don't have to cope with. I wanted to talk a little bit about how the brain works. So why we have adaptations and why they are considered maladaptive when we are looking at them for the purpose of maybe diagnosing a disorder or understanding why, as individuals, understanding why we have these adaptations in our lives, why we struggle with eating disorders and things, and why we might struggle with dissociation or flashbacks, etc. So as your brain develops, you're born primarily with the right brain, which is the emotional side of the brain, and the reason for this is developmentally your survival depends on relationship with others. So it makes sense that you only have your emotional brain to be able to tap into relationships with other people in order to elicit the things that you need, like food and water and love, to survive. And that's why a lot of the self-soothing problems that we have as adults are still occurring because we haven't had that secure attachment as a child. So I followed the work of Dr. Alan Shaw for quite a long time. He's known for the modern attachment theory, and you can look that up if you are a bit of a nerd like me and like to understand all that stuff. But he, in one of his lectures, he gave a picture of a breastfeeding mother, and he explained how when the mother picks up the baby and makes eye contact with the child knows that it's been seen, and when the mother pulls the child close, either for a cuddle or to breastfeed and give them food, the child is close enough to the parent to hear the mother's heartbeat, and she can feed the child, but while the child's being fed, there's something else going on in the autonomic nervous system where the baby's crying and the baby's fast heart rate the baby has the ear against the mother, and the baby can hear the heart rate of the mother, and it can learn how to regulate its nervous system based on this attachment with a secure, healthy mother or parent in their life. And I know I didn't have that always. My mum was very chaotic, and her emotions would change like a flash, so even if I did manage to soothe myself, in about 10 seconds it would be chaos again. So I didn't have that consistency, And I know from my own experience, I can say that a lot of my adaptations came out from not knowing how to deal with the chaos outside. And my main way of dealing with the chaos outside was to project it inwardly, because my internal world was the only thing that I had any control over. And that is, for me, the biggest adaptation that still causes me problems now as an adult. But the next part of child development, when you get past the relational right brain, learning how to self-soothe and stuff, is anger management and social interaction. And that is, Dr. Shaw speaks of as more the second parent role, so maybe typically the father, but I suppose it doesn't have to be the father, but that second person's role is to help you regulate your anger, give you examples of how to do that well, and how to be, I don't want to say socially acceptable, but how to deal with problems when you come across them in society. I know that when I hear things on the news, I find it incredibly distressing, because I not only think about how that person feels, and I have an emotional connection with how they feel often because I've been through something similar myself, it can also bring up trauma in me. So I'm feeling everything I feel about them and how it felt about myself, and then my anger becomes, well, can become almost unmanageable in that moment. So I wanted to talk about that side of development as well, because I think often we shame ourselves for being so angry, or we can go the other way and feel like we're righteously angry. And there's an element of truth in that. Sometimes things in life are wrong, but we have a responsibility with our anger that we manage it in a way that doesn't then go on to hurt somebody else. And because we never want to hurt somebody, because we know what that feels like. And I think some of the hardest times in my trauma history is when I haven't been able to control my anger, and then I've gone and done something that's hurt someone. I mean, I'm not talking about anything serious, but we have to deal with the moral injury of that afterwards, and it becomes this perpetual cycle that's really difficult to cope with. But the good news is that when we get to about 13, we start to bring online the left side of the brain, so we can start to question things in the world. And I know for me that was quite a painful process, when you suddenly realise that these people that are your family, that you are supposed to have trusted and believed every word they said, have often lied to you or done things to you that are really quite evil. And you can't reconcile that. It's like the ultimate irreconcilable problem. And I know for me, this is when a lot of the adaptive behaviours really kicked in on a level that was seriously intense, like the self-harm feelings and suicidality and eating problems. Because I had more resources available to me, because I could think, well, if I do this, then I'll feel better for a little while, and maybe that'll just be enough to get me through today or the next 5 minutes or whatever. But obviously those things are damaging to me, and now that I'm an adult, there's a lot of those things that I don't want to do anymore. So I just wanted to finish up really by saying that hopefully by understanding how your brain develops and why you've developed these adaptations in your life to manage your distress, that you will actually feel less shame about them, because it's very logical, it's very structured, which I personally think is an absolute miracle, considering that for many of us those parts of our brains weren't online when we came up with this structure. And I feel like I owe a deep sense of gratitude to, this makes me emotional, but a deep sense of gratitude to those parts of me that dealt with those things before they really could. But I also feel a strong desire, out of just respect and love for them really, to go back and look at those things now as an adult and say, you know, I have got more resources available to me as an adult. I do have some secure attachments in my life now, and that maybe hurting myself or not eating properly doesn't have to be my reality forever. And that's where the hope lies. That's where change happens. And I would say to any of you out there who are still stuck in the loop of I'm fine, it's not really trauma, that I just hope for you that you would hear the words that I've shared with you today and realise that that's hurting you, and maybe that me sharing with you that it does get easier when you face it would give you the hope and the bit of courage and the love that you need to just take a step out of that and really in earnest start to accept what you've been through, because that's the start of the grieving process. And once we accept what's happened to us and we've grieved what's happened to us, a lot of our distress gets processed, so it doesn't get to that same level where we have to live in the cycle of we get too distressed, we do something to numb us, and then we get ashamed about that, and then we start the cycle all over again. Yeah, I think that's all I'm going to share today. So if no one else has told you today, I want you to know that I love you, and please leave me your comments down below. Share with me how you feel about things that I've said, if there's anything you want me to talk about, and I just hope that you get into a place of happiness and healing soon. Bye.